Hi, I'm Leon Charney, and this is the Leon Charney Report. And we know that you're tuning into us not to celebrate Easter Sunday with us, although we do wish all of you a happy Easter, and to the Jews, forthcoming happy Passover. And we hope you had a good Purim. And again, to the atheists, we hope you have happy days. But we know that you're tuning into us to find out what's going on in the Middle East. And if we can figure it out, I'm not sure, but the one who can help me the best is Lally Weymouth. And you remember Lally, she's the star correspondent journalist for the Washington Post and Newsweek Magazine. She gets all the scoops. She's visited personally with President Assad, Yasser Arafat, King Hussein, and I'm not sure who else yet. Anybody else that we should know in the Arab world? I know you were to India last time we spoke about that. The Prime Minister of India, who was a little bit brusque with you, right?
Well, yeah, yeah. But he was okay once he got going, yeah.
All right, Lally, it's a serious time. Israel's really been knocked over by the apropos bombing last week. Apropos is the name of the cafe in Tel Aviv, pretty close to where you and I sometimes hang out, maybe 5-7 blocks from the Hilton Hotel, where they really heard the bang. And Bibi Netanyahu comes on television, places the blame on Yasser Arafat. So what do you think?
Well, you know, I heard before the bombing that I was working on a story in Washington on Israel, and I heard before the bombing took place that Arafat had given a green light to terror. And I heard that from an Israeli source, and I went over to the State Department and I said, what do you think? And the State Department before the bombing was saying they didn't believe that was so. And as you know, since that time, they've somewhat changed their tune. But the Israelis have insisted that Arafat did give a green light to terror, as you know, Leon, in a March 9th meeting, that he gave the okay, or a signal of the okay, if not a direct okay, to Hamas leaders.
He also freed some leaders.
That's right. And he freed the head of one of them, the militant wing of Hamas. And
have you read the stories, though, that they claim that maybe this suicide bomber was a disgruntled waiter who worked in Tel Aviv, and he didn't have the appearance or the profile, let's say, of a terrorist? Have you read some of those stories? You believe that?
Well, I think that I think it's the coincidences are very odd, if that were to be the case. I think, for instance, that our viewers undoubtedly may know or should know that the cooperation between Israel and the Palestinian Authority has totally broken down, which was really the backbone of the Oslo Accords.
Right.
And what I mean by broken down is that when the head of the Shin Bet called, he had a hotline in his office to the head of the Palestinian Security, and during the last week, when he picked up his phone and called the guy, the Palestinian guy.
Chief of Security, right.
Right, exactly. The Palestinian refused to answer the phone, okay, for the head of the Shin Bet. And that's saying a lot, as you know. So in other words, the actual cooperation between the security services is gone. At the same time that the bombing took place, the Hamas leader was making a speech, a freed Hamas leader was making a speech about violence and how, you know, the Palestinians would only achieve their means by violence at a mass rally. There have been daily demonstrations by Palestinians on the West Bank. I think there's too much going on to say this was just a coincidence and this was just a waiter, disgruntled waiter.
All right, so assuming you're right and everybody else is right, are we back to square one? What happens in the Middle East now?
It doesn't look good, I would say. Dennis Ross, everything hangs, I think, right now on Dennis Ross's mission. Dennis Ross, of course, is the head of the chief negotiator
but
for the United States.
He can paste them together again. The ill will is still there. This could happen again and again and again. I mean, there's a basic ill will that's going on in Israel. Now, I think you got to go back to the election of Bibi Netanyahu, and I think you got to go back to what his platform was and how dramatically he changed his platform and how the right wing was jolted, in a sense, or neutralized. And then he has to come back and appease his right wing a little bit. I mean, it's a tough situation, and the country is under siege. I talked to friends and relatives over there. People are really nervous, and they're afraid that there might be another bombing, and it's a terrible time.
I think that our mutual friend Nahum Barnea, who's the leading journalist in Israel, I would say, or one of them.
He pinned it on Arafat.
No, he didn't pin it on Arafat. What he did is he wrote an interesting column this week saying, which gives a flavor, I think, of what things are like in Israel this week, saying that if Arafat keeps this up, if Israel has to live with 7 little girls being killed and then the 3 women being killed in the cafe, he said, then we'll all be Benny Begin. Now, this is somebody who's very much in favor.
And he lost his son last year.
That's correct. But this is somebody who's very, very much in favor of the peace process and very reluctant to write it. And I spoke with him today. And
what does he say?
well, he's saying that he went over to Gaza and he tried to find out, did Arafat directly give the order to conduct the apropos bombing. And he said he couldn't find any evidence that he directly gave the order. But he said there were a lot of signs that there were indirect signals that he wouldn't mind if something happened. And as you know, Arafat then left the country.
That is probably, that's true. That's Arafat's modus vivendi. That's the way he would operate.
That's the way he's always operated.
He'd try to have a defense in case the United States called up, because the United States has treated him fairly well when he was here the last time.
Very well.
So he says, I'm not in town, I'm not around, and you know, I don't know what happened. That's generally his defense. The question is why he's doing that. Is he really in good faith ever? Can they trust him? And you're going back to these original questions, which are endless and boundless. I mean, if you don't go forward with the peace process, what do you do?
Well, that's true. I think there are two things going on here. I think you're right that the peace process has to move forward. At the same time, unfortunately, I think that President Arafat has learned a very bad lesson, and he learned it over the tunnel incident last fall, which was when the Palestinians took to the streets and there were armed conflict between the Palestinians and Israeli soldiers. The world, in a sense, rallied behind Arafat in an unprecedented manner.
Absolutely.
And I think that Arafat learned then what he knows today, that when things don't go to his liking, he can turn to the world, complain, hold conferences in Gaza. The United States will send Abington, our consul general, and and that he can rally immense support and, in a sense, isolate Israel, which is really very bad for Israel.
So, if you're Bibi Netanyahu, would you have started to build on Har Homa?
No. Definitely not.
Why? Because you were warned that this might happen?
I don't think I would need to be warned. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is a very smart man. I know him as you do, and I respect him. I think he would be fully aware, as would most people, that that would be a provocative act to the Arabs.
So why did he do it?
Well, I presume that he did it. I'm only guessing. And from talking to journalists and other people in Israel, I presume that he did it because, in a sense, the Prime Minister had done some things that were really pretty down the center of the road, like the Hebron Agreement. I think was a very good thing that he did. And although he got a lot of support in the country for agreeing to make a deal with the Palestinians on Hebron, the right wing hated the agreement, as you know, Leon. And I assume that he was trying to placate the right wing.
Obviously. And
he's a politician, of course, and he has to be reelected like every other politician.
I think you're right. And I think further, I think the message was correct, but the wrong messenger. I think Jews should have a right to build in Jerusalem. I think that's absolute. But I'm sure the timing and the way it's being presented has to be done in a different way. And I think that's the problem of what's happening here in Israel. I believe that Bibi Netanyahu went very far in Hebron because it goes against exactly what he said he wasn't going to do. It goes against him kissing Arafat and shaking him so vibrantly at the White House and speaking with him. These are people on the West Bank who voted against Peres because he did those types of things. And now Bibi had to show I have strength and I have to do it. But people are dying with these. Wolf Blitzer, your friend and mine, said to me, you know, Leon, you know, we talked about it last night. He said, you know, I agree with you, Leon, except the timing was at the right timing. So It's sad, and basically, I don't think anybody knows where it's going. And Dennis Ross, God bless him, I mean, he can work tirelessly. You know, he ran to Morocco. He didn't go
I know.
because
I'm aware of
you know
that.
what happened in Morocco?
Yes, they had a conference.
They had a conference, and the countries that were mediocre or lukewarm towards Israel and warming up towards Israel are now starting to pull back. And
Which is, I think, the tragedy of the
Terrible.
present situation under Netanyahu. And I think the benefit of the peace process for Israel was the fact that countries in the region and outside the region were beginning to accept Israel.
Absolutely.
Open relations with Israel was a tremendous thing when Rabin came here for the 50th anniversary, and he was mobbed, he was popular. And we're going back to the old...
do you believe, you know Mubarak, you've been with him,
Yes,
right?
I have.
Do you believe he's in good faith?
Well, I think I think the head of any state is always pursuing his own interest. Do I believe he's in good faith? I believe he's in good faith as far as Egypt goes. But I think he's okay.
Do you think he's for the peace process?
Yes, I do. I think he's all right. I think Abba Musa is pushing the envelope of the peace process, the foreign minister of Egypt.
He's a tough guy.
And very tough.
You believe King Hussein is for the peace process?
Yes, I definitely do. I think King Hussein has taken tremendous risks for peace. But I thought that King Hussein's letter a few weeks ago to Netanyahu was really astonishing. You know, saying that he was very upset and far more eloquently than I'm stating the case. And
But you think it was a correct letter for him to send?
From his point of view?
Yeah.
From his
Do you
point
think
of
he
view.
stirred up a storm?
I don't think that's a fair...
You know, he's very loved in Israel. When he came to visit the parents of the children or the relatives
That
of
was
the children,
that was a very
people
nice
were crying.
action.
I mean, I spoke to people that day.
Yeah.
The country was absolutely in love with him. And
Well, look at his speech at the Rabin funeral.
yeah, so
It's extraordinary.
but Bibi comes in, and now these people are disgruntled. Mubarak is disgruntled.
Yeah.
Hussein is disgruntled. They're having Islamic conferences in Morocco, trying to... The king of Morocco, who was very influential in Camp David, the secret
terrific.
meetings between Moshe Dayan and
Right.
the king of Morocco
Absolutely.
started the ball rolling. And
100%
all these
right.
people are diffusing themselves, and it's terrible.
That's the tragedy of the situation. Netanyahu is an able person. He's nice, but he seems not to be able to function as a prime minister. Yitzhak Rabin had a long relationship with King Hussein. That, as you know, they'd had endless secret meetings in the desert.
Right.
Yitzhak Rabin had a long sense of history. He'd grown up in the state. It's a very different situation. I think Netanyahu may have great intentions, but he seems to be pleasing no one. And as you say, the situation seems to be reeling out of control.
Well, about 8 months ago, I broadcast from Israel. I said the only way out of this quagmire is a unity government. I really felt it. I feel it now. I feel it every day. I see somebody reported in the New York Times today that they're really talking about it, that Perez and Bibi are talking. The man who probably can hold and put that together is Eliezer Weitzman, our friend, your friend, my friend. And I speak to him quite regularly, and I'm sure that he's working avidly at doing that.
But Perez has only till June 3rd to put together a unity government, because as you know, on June 3rd, a young star in the Labor Party, Ehud Barak, General Ehud Barak, is going to take over the Labor Party.
Right.
And he has a very good chance, I believe, at being Israel's next prime minister. And he doesn't want a unity government.
I know. And
he wants a real opposition.
Well, you know, the other guy who doesn't want a unity government is Yitzhak Mordechai, who's the defense minister of Israel. Doesn't
That's
want
right.
to give up. But Lally, these people have got to come together. There's a crisis in the country, and the egos and the future of the leadership is not what's at stake now. What's at stake is getting the people into a situation where they have security and they can go forward with peace. I don't see how Bibi Netanyahu can do it the way the structure of the government is today. I can't see it.
You may be right, but an Israeli reporter, who's a friend of mine, said to me today that he thought that Netanyahu was using the threat of a unity government
To pacify.
get all his Likud ministers in line, and that all these ministers who'd been complaining and so on and so forth about Netanyahu, all of a sudden they realized there was a risk that they would lose their positions.
I've heard
and
that.
so as a result, they're coming into line with Netanyahu because they don't want Ehud Barak to become defense minister. And this friend of mine, this reporter friend of mine, said to me that he thinks that it will not happen, that Benjamin Netanyahu will not form a unity government.
I think he's 50% right. I think it's a 50-50 chance. I think you're right that Bibi is using it as a political move to keep his people in place. But I think the urgency of the situation, Yediot Achronot, which is the largest newspaper, which was the one that Barnea writes for, in an editorial today called for a unity government.
Right,
I mean,
but they're still not prime minister,
no,
so we'll have to wait and see.
No, but the Washington Post isn't, and they brought down Mr. Nixon. We got to cut for a commercial break. You know the Washington Post, right? We'll be right back after commercial break to continue this very important subject, and who else better to talk to than Lally Weymouth? We'll be right back. We're back. I'm Leon Charney with Lally Weymouth of the Washington Post. You all know her. She's been on my show hundreds of times, and she's one of the best we have about a lot of things, but especially the Middle East, where she and I have both traveled extensively. And you can remember that we did a live show from WNYC, It Should Rest in Peace, the night of the Rabin funeral. No, it was
the night of the Israeli elections.
Both. We did the night of the Israeli elections, and also we did a live show about Rabin's funeral. And both times we scored very high, higher than Larry King. So Larry, I'm sorry, but maybe my suspenders are showing. Anyway, let's talk more about the Middle East. So if Bibi Netanyahu stays with his present government, I think Arik Sharon and maybe two or other ministers said that they should break off talks altogether. So what kind of government is that? And United, by the way, we haven't talked about the influence of Bill Clinton here and your favorite subject, Madeleine Albright.
Madeleine Albright, yes.
What can she do in the Middle East that...
Well, you know, Leon, there are rumors that Madeleine Albright might possibly go to the Middle East if Dennis Ross pulls off any kind of deal, any kind of settlement. And so that would be interesting, of course. But
so what would that do?
Well, that's a good question. But definitely somebody in the State Department close to Albright told me that that was the plan, and I heard it. I heard it first in Israel from a reporter in Israel.
Is she a good choice, Secretary of State?
I think so. I think she'll be quite good.
Do you really do?
Yes, I do. She gave me the first interview, as you know, and she talked about her for Newsweek, and she talked about her Jewish past, her forgotten Jewish past, and so on and so forth. And you know, I asked
that became a big story.
Yeah, right. And I asked her the questions about, you know, why weren't you more curious, and so on and so forth.
Right. Why wasn't she more curious? Not everybody read your article. Well,
she said that her parents, after all, actually, to be fair to Madeleine, converted and became Catholics, and they'd left Czechoslovakia. So she grew up a Catholic. And she says that she led a very isolated life with her parents. And when you ask her, well, why weren't you...
She had a cousin that lived with her who was Jewish. And all that.
Yeah,
doesn't fit exactly, you know?
But well, you know, I would say in the interview she did as well as she could possibly do. I mean, I asked her, I said, I heard you saying to an Israeli reporter at the embassy last night, you know, he asked her, how do you feel about your heritage? And so I asked her, and she said, I'm proud of my heritage. And I said, did you mean your Jewish heritage? Right. And she said, yes. And she said, I'm proud of all my heritage. And then she just went on to talk about the fact that she'd received letters, and she probably wished she'd done more. She wished she'd pursued the topic more hotly, but that she'd been working night and day at the UN, and that she hadn't pursued the topic, and that she was very surprised, especially that her grandparents died in death camps.
She didn't know that?
That's what she said.
Well, your paper did a great job, by the way, in digging up that story.
Michael Dobbs, yeah.
The Washington Post was brilliant on that. I guess they sent them overseas, and
yes.
It was a great job. And it's important. I think it's okay, and the people who worry about Israel and the Middle East, she'll be fine, and it's not a big thing. And it's her own character problem, which she has to live with. I don't think it's a big issue for us. It depends.
But I think she has other virtues, actually. I mean, I think she's a refugee. She's an immigrant. She has a certain sensibility. She was fairly anti-communist. Well, I think she's an interesting person.
Your friend Henry had the same background. Henry Kissinger. She's very close.
Well, and I mean, I think that's a plus. How
you with Brzezinski? You close
I think I admire Brzezinski. I'm not close to him personally.
All of these were European people, right?
Yes.
And Albright?
Yes.
So you got a team of foreigners running the State Department. Which
well, I don't think that's fair.
No, well, foreign-born.
Yeah.
Foreign-born people. Arik Sharon. you know him well also.
Yes, I do.
Have you had any conversations with him that would be illuminating to us or our audience?
I haven't talked to him lately. Have you?
No, I haven't even talked to Uri Dunn, who's.
But I know that he had a lot of. He played an important role in Netanyahu's election. He feels.
Oh, yeah.
He feels that he brought Netanyahu the Orthodox vote, the vote of the Orthodox community. And Netanyahu has said, he didn't tell me this personally, but in Israel he's said to have promised Sharon one of the 3 top seats, in other words, defense, foreign affairs, and he didn't get it. And I was there in the parliament the day that Sharon found out he wasn't going to get a seat. And he wasn't really pleased about that. And then finally they invented a kind of ministry for him.
Infrastructure, it's a huge ministry.
And I think that, Netanyahu was very unsuccessful in a way in making people who did work for him feel good and stick with him as colleagues.
I think you're right. And he did not want to see Meridor as the Minister of the Finance, Treasury.
Mm-hmm. And Meridor's a marvelous person, I think.
And he got it. And he was pushed in.
But he was pushed in part by Benny Begin, who has now left the government, as you know.
What's this group around Bibi Netanyahu? Yvette Lieberman and, you know, all these...
I know David Barlan. I don't know Yvette Lieberman, and moreover, I don't know anyone else who does know him. But I've heard tales about him. But I mean,
Russian tales?
I guess the tale about Netanyahu, the myth about Netanyahu by now is that he's surrounded by a very small group of people, and that he doesn't seek the advice of Dan Meridor and people who have had a lot of experience in politics in Israel.
All right, Lally, you had the first major interview with Bibi Netanyahu as a foreign journalist for Newsweek and Washington Post.
Right.
Do you see anything that you interviewed him with those days that concur with what he's doing today?
Well, I've always found Benjamin Netanyahu an impressive person. He's articulate. He's extremely convincing, I think, and compelling as a spokesperson for Israel. But one thing he said to me I thought was really interesting. I asked him, I said, I heard that he was very impressed when he was briefed by the Chief of Staff about how successful the cooperation was with the Palestinian Authority. And he told me, yes, that was true. And I said, does that mean you believe the Palestinian Authority, i.e. Arafat, can control Hamas, the terror group? And he said, yes, they can if they want to. Now, to me, that's the heart of the issue. Can Arafat control Hamas? Because if he can, Israel has a partner. And if he can, then there's a possibility of a real peace. And Netanyahu, of course, had said all through the previous year that you couldn't subcontract
terrorism.
Yeah, under security. And that's what he said during the campaign when he was attacking Paris. But in effect, to me, he was saying, yes, the cooperation works. And that's what he meant when he said you can't subcontract security. You can't subcontract to the Palestinian Authority. So the Israeli media made a big deal out of it. But as I would say, it's an on the one hand, on the other hand. I would have thought from talking to him that he would have been more impressive as prime minister than he appears to have been to date.
Are you tracking the story with him and Baron, the Attorney General, who was in there for about 4.5 minutes? And Bibi Netanyahu was given a warning when he was questioned by the police, which is tantamount to being before a grand jury in the United States. First time in the history of Israel. You think he'll fall on that, or you think he'll survive?
Well, you know, one of the best reporters in Israel, Shimon Schiffer, told me today on the phone, he said, you know, this is the most unfair story. I don't know if this is true, but he's an excellent reporter.
Schiffer and he said, are a team usually.
Right. But he told me that the people who reported this story only worked on it for a few hours. It was not well prepared. They didn't go to the people they were attacking. They didn't say, what's your side of the story, like an American journalist would do. And I thought that was really very interesting. And Schiffer said that he predicts that nothing will come of this story. So, you know, he could be right, he could be wrong, but it's an interesting view.
I think Bibi Netanyahu will stay. I think Tzaki Hanegbi, who's the Minister of Justice, may fall. And maybe Lieberman may be kicked around a little bit. Somebody's going to take the heat. The story may not be 100% correct, but Derry, who is the macher, shall we say, of the Shas party, is under indictment. And anything's possible. It doesn't look good.
There's some
got
kind of deal, you mean?
Cut for a commercial break. Hang on. We'll be right back with Lally Weymouth to continue. We'll see a little bit more of the world with her because she'll tell you how bad it is in Turkey and Caucasus. If you don't know what that is, stay tuned. We're back. We're speaking with Lally Weymouth, and I'm Leon Charney. Lally is the star journalist, preeminent journalist of the Washington Post and Newsweek Magazine. First interview with Bibi Netanyahu. First interview with Madeleine Albright, and she's on the Leon Charney Report whenever we call her, so we have her, and we're excited to have her. But we have to cover a few more areas. We've done the Middle East. We don't know how to solve it yet. We'll bring on a general. Maybe he can, he's an artillery man. Maybe he can show us where the artillery should be going. And we'll talk to Lally about the Caucasus, which you've just written about. What's going on over there?
Well, what I was writing about was I wrote about a young man who's 33 years old, who's the Speaker of the Parliament in the country of Georgia. And I was writing about his concerns that the Clinton administration would give up the Caucasus, so to speak, to Russian influence as part of...
Explain to the audience the Caucasus. I'm not sure everybody knows.
Okay, the Caucasus are Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And the reason they're very important to Americans is that there's a lot of oil in the Caspian Sea. And we, the United States, hopes that oil will move out of the Caspian Sea via a pipeline.
Right.
And that pipeline could go through Georgia to...
Isn't Shevardnadze the president of Georgia?
He is, and he's quite an impressive person.
Very good guy.
Yes, exactly. And but for us, there's more than, you know, the independence of the former Soviet republics is a good cause in itself. But the fact that we also have oil reserves at stake in the future makes Georgia an even more important country to us.
Right.
And to make a long story short, the Georgians were very worried that the Clinton administration, in return for Russia agreeing to the enlargement of NATO, i.e. the Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia entering NATO, that they would give the Russians something. And indeed, a senior administration official said to me, yes, we have to give the Russians something. So the people in the Caucasus weren't wrong. They weren't paranoid.
So they're
They
worried
were
the
right.
Americans are going to sell them out?
Yeah.
Period.
They were worried that, that we would basically allow them to become dominated by Russia. And they don't want to be dominated by Russia. And so I wrote a column saying, you know, we shouldn't allow this to happen. We should try to keep Russia within its borders, and we should strengthen the states on Russia's
Did you get a lot of reaction to that article?
Yeah, I did get some reaction.
I'm sure you would.
Yeah.
Because it looks like the policy's going the other way.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, the Clinton administration to date has appeared to have what we call a Russia first policy.
Right, absolutely. Yeltsin first.
Yeah, which means putting Russia above the countries that we call the former Soviet republics.
By the way, Lally, you're in Washington all the time. Scuttlebutt, is Clinton really in trouble?
I would say he's in pretty big trouble. What would you say?
I'd say he's in a little bit of trouble. Does the big trouble mean impeachment?
I think that's very hard to say. That's really a stretch. But I think the allegation of taking foreign money and changing United States foreign policy in return is a very, very serious policy, charge rather, excuse me.
Okay, they have to prove it.
They have to prove it, but it doesn't, I mean, day after day
what's disturbing is when the President of the United States is fighting with the FBI director for information, and the FBI director says, I'm not going to give you the information. It's tantamount to an insurrection, you know? And he says, well, I don't think you're doing the right thing, which leads me to a place called Turkey, which looks like is going to have the same problems, because the generals are getting fed up with the Islamic nature of the prime minister over there.
Well, you know, Turkey sounds like very faraway place.
It's not. It's very, very important. It's part of NATO.
That's right.
It's right next to Europe. It borders about 8 different countries.
And it has a very strong, it has a very good relationship with Israel.
Well, it had, you know, it's tempered.
It still has.
Yeah, the Airdate went over there.
Thanks to its military.
Right.
But Turkey has a problem called Mrs. Chiller, and she was formerly prime minister, and she's very attractive looking and so on and so forth. But she and her husband seem to have engaged in somewhat questionable practices, shall we say. I think there is some money allegedly missing. That when she was
a very big estate in New England. You know that?
Well,
In Connecticut, I know that.
Okay, there was a fund that was directly under the control of the Prime Minister. When she leaves, the fund is empty. And so Parliament was supposed to look into a lot of Mrs. Chiller's...
Maybe it went to the DNC.
Okay, well, no comment. But Mrs. Chiller, anyway, was... Parliament, the Turkish Parliament was going to look into her activities. Now, so Mrs. Chiller is very clever.
She formed a government with the...
She made a deal with the Islamists.
She's the Ari Deri of Israel.
Well,
Turkey.
she's worse than that, really, though, because it is a very serious thing. The Islamists only got 20% of the vote, although you would never know that from reading the American media in the last Turkish election. In other words, they would never have come to power on their own. But Mrs. Chiller, in order to kill the corruption inquiry charges against her, made a deal with the Islamists, brought them to power. And now the generals, the army, is saying to both Chiller and to Erbakan, the prime minister, they're saying if you don't abide by the rules of the secular democratic state, they're essentially saying in nice language, you're out. And they're saying these are the rules. And at the last National Security Council meeting, they laid down certain rules. No more bashing Israel, no more having so-called Jerusalem night, where they had pictures of Hamas leaders and Islamic Jihad leaders. And they forged a very close relationship with Iran. I mean, I could go on for hours. They've done outrageous things.
Israel is very clever. I was involved a little bit with that. They sell them a lot of military equipment, and the military in Israel and Turkey, they like each other very much, and there's a lot of cross correspondence and cross maneuvers, tra-la-la-la. And you're absolutely right, but what people don't understand is if Turkey goes down, it's a pluralistic Islamic country, and that thing could spread all through Europe, and Islamic fundamentalism could go haywire. So I agree with you, and it's always overlooked. And I always ask people in Washington, why do you overlook Turkey? And they say, well, it's the Greek lobby.
Well, that's true. And then there's another problem. A, it's the Greek lobby. You're absolutely right, Leon. And B, worse still, there were people in the administration, there are people in the administration who thought we could have a great experiment in Turkey with, that we could tame Islamic radicalism in Turkey. Now that, to me, is a very dangerous thing. It's saying, like, these people hate you, but we'll have an experiment and we can get along with them and have a dialogue with them. I don't think it's going to work. And I think the Turkish military is right, and I think we should support them.
I think so, too. You and I agree on Turkey totally. Yeah. Let's pick another topic, because we know we're running out of time. We never have you long enough, Lally. Newt Gingrich, will he survive?
That's a good question. I don't know, actually. And it's really amazing. He was such a star.
It's unbelievable.
It is. He was just such an amazing star. I mean, 2 years ago, people thought he was going to be president. I mean, to think that people are now saying, you know, will he survive? And at the last Republican convention, he was almost invisible. It was really extraordinary.
Well, 18 conservatives, you know, didn't go with him last week. I mean, it's a pretty good slap in the face. And so and they start looking around like for fellas like Kasich and Army and all these guys.
Kasich is attractive, I think.
Very. Just got married, though. We lost him, but you know.
No, he's an attractive guy. He's the son of a postman.
Really?
Yeah, he's very, very attractive, I think. And I think he's a rising star in Republican ranks.
Trent Lott doing a good job?
I think he's doing an okay job, yes. I think he's a man to watch, obviously. He has a lot of power as majority leader. And the question is he going to be just another Bob Dole, get along, go along, or is he going to really stand for something? And that's not clear yet, I don't think.
Republicans certainly have one thing over the Democrats. They got a president who jumped out of a plane, 72 years old.
Yeah, wasn't that great?
He parachuted.
Yeah,
That's
that was
unbelievable,
terrific,
isn't
wasn't it?
It's terrific.
George Bush is amazing. I thought that was really quite stunning at 72.
I saw your old friend last week, President Carter, at the Carter Center in Georgia. He asked about you and told me he was reading your mother's book, which is a bestseller, by the way.
Terrific.
What's the name of the book? We might as well plug the book.
Personal History by Katharine Graham.
Personal History by Katharine Graham. And you'll see a lot about Lally. That's her mother, you know, so it makes a lot of sense. Jimmy Carter said something interesting to me. He said, had the Palestinians listened to what Camp David really said, they would have been much better off than they are today under the Oslo Agreement. They could have had much more. And he said what happened is fascinating. And we have an exclusive with him on that. And what happened was that all the Arab world ostracized the Egyptians, if you remember. When Sadat signed the treaty, he was thrown out of the Arab League.
Absolutely.
So he said Carter made that point, and he did it for a film that will celebrate the 50th anniversary of Israel. And he went into detail. He said, by the way, it's fascinating, the most brilliant man he ever met in his life, although he didn't agree with him, was...
I don't know.
Menachem Begin.
Really?
Is that unbelievable?
Yeah, well, he did do an extraordinary thing, Begin.
No, but he said the most, I mean, Carter's met everybody in the world. He said
That's
the most
interesting.
brilliant man that he met was
Really?
Menachem Begin.
I interviewed him once, but I must say I wouldn't have come
Menachem
away with it.
Begin?
Yeah.
He didn't speak Polish. He used
No,
to talk like
that's
this.
right.
He used to have a glass of tea. You
Yeah,
know,
you got
everything was nice.
that one right.
But-
that's interesting that he felt that way.
Which brings me to another question. Begin was a great leader. We both agree, correct?
Yes, and I think Camp David was really a
Well,
turning
that's
point.
the hallmark of
Yeah.
everything, of the peace
And
process.
Sadat was a great leader, let's face it.
Absolutely.
I think the more time you spend in the Middle East, the more remarkable you realize Sadat was.
That's a very good, you're absolutely right.
Because I've spent a fair amount of time interviewing Arab leaders, and you really come to appreciate
Your
Anwar Sadat.
friend and co-journalist Judith Miller, who wrote a book, a very good book,
Yeah,
by
she's
the way,
terrific.
she told me that she thought the most enviable personality in the Middle East was King Hussein. She thought he was terrific. And you know Hussein.
Yes, I admire him.
All right,
too.
I know you got to run. You interviewed Assad. You were impressed by maybe his intelligence, but not his character. Am I correct?
Well, I don't
All
think
right,
I don't think he's running for a niceness prize.
All right. So, is he ready, willing, and able to talk about peace in the middle with Israel?
Look, Leon, you and I are sitting here saying the Palestinian agreement, which really was on track more or less. You know, when Peres was prime minister last year, it looked like you could move toward a Syrian deal. But now, with the Palestinian deal essentially falling apart, the Intifada apparently in some form or other starting up again, I don't see how we can look toward Assad in a Syrian deal. I might be wrong, but I'd be very surprised. I know that the United States was very interested in this when Netanyahu came for one of his visits. I know this was discussed at the White House between Clinton and Netanyahu. And I don't know what the Israeli reaction was, but I remember right after Hebron, people were saying, is it possible to go twice, you know, to China in 1 year? I mean, can Netanyahu really do this?
No.
And even if Assad were willing, and there's no evidence or sign that he's willing.
So you think it's a no?
I think it's,
That was a long
at
no.
present, a definite no.
All right, I'll let you go. The last question. Was the United States too friendly to Yasser Arafat on his last visit here?
Well, that's a good question. I think the interesting question to watch is there a change in the United States' attitude toward Israel? And I think we'll have to watch.
Lally,
Bye, Leon.
thanks for coming on.
Thank you for asking
You're
me.
great as usual. We'll be right back, and we have an Israeli general we're going to ask the same questions to. He's not in uniform, so we can ask him anything we want. We'll be right back. We're back. I'm Leon Charney, and I have with me Brigadier General Eliezer Hemeli, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He was a big man in the artillery from 1973 in the Northern Command till practically a couple of years ago. He knows what it's like to face the Syrians, I can guarantee you. Today he's on a little bit of an easier job. He's Executive Director of the Friends of IDF, which is a support group to help the soldiers of Israel live better, hospitalize them better, and give them clubs and hotels and make their life more comfortable, because it's not easy being in the Israeli IDF. Welcome to the show, Eliezer.
Good evening.
Tell me, Israel today, with all these terrorism attacks, and I know you can't go into politics, but give me a military view.
Well, Leon, let's tell the truth. I mean, we are 50 years in struggle since the establishment of the State of Israel. It's a struggle, and the struggle is terrorism and battles since 48 and 56, 67, 73, 82, and the war of attrition in betweens. So every single day is a day of fighting and struggle, and I believe that we are looking forward for a better future, and today is another wave of violence which will have to go forward.
Is the Army changing tactics now because of the Oslo agreements? Do they have a different way of moving than they did in the past? I mean, since the Intifada, a lot of soldiers have become, in a sense, policemen. Instead of being trained like you were in artillery or other, other branches of government, not government, the military service. Are there different types of units now being put together to help with the security problems?
Not at all. I mean, you have to realize a soldier is a soldier. I could be trained as an artillery soldier, an artillery officer, and if there is a all-in-all war in the Syrian front or in any other front, I'll be commanding my artillery units. But if the mission today or yesterday or tomorrow will be to take care of the area on the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, and we'll have to take some different training and to do it, so we'll take our unit and we'll take another job during this period of time. So we have to realize that really you have to be able to do any kind of job that you're expected to do. Depends on the situation. If it's a war in the Northern Command, you'll be in artillery. If you have to take care of riots in Shechem, then you'll do it in Shechem, and you'll train yourself. And basically, we haven't changed anything.
I know you're here to talk about the Friends of IDF, but I'm not going to let you out so easily because we'll talk about that for a few minutes. I want your personal opinion. You're also a citizen of Israel. You have a family. If I remember, you have 4 children and a wife, and you come from Netanya. So tell me what the effect of the assassination was of Yitzhak Rabin on the state of mind of, you were in the military at that point. Did you believe that a Jew would assassinate another Jew, especially the Prime Minister of Israel?
Never in my life. For me, it was a tremendous shock. I mean, and
where were you when it happened?
When it happened, I was here in the United States, and I heard it through a telephone conversation which I had during the same minutes with Israel on a different subject, and I learned about the fact that he was shot and later that he died. And for all of us, I mean, people, you know, who are fighting for this country, who wants to see this country flourishing, for us it was a shock which was totally unbelievable. We could not believe that such a thing could happen in Israel. We simply couldn't believe it. And for me, someone like Rabin, who really represent the beautiful side of the Israeli society, from the 40s fighting with the Haganah, with the Palmach, to being a very young leader in the Battle over Jerusalem, and then 67, 73, to lead the Israeli forces to Jerusalem, to unite Jerusalem, and to take all Sinai and the Golan Heights, and then to return as a prime minister to lead the peace effort, to take really tough decisions which are not popular, but to be sure that that's the right thing. Someone who has seen the ugly face of war and took a brave decision to move forward, although it was not very popular. For me and for people like me, Rabin reflects the model of what we would have liked to see the Israeli society in the future. That's our model. And to think that this person who gave every single second of his life to the state of Israel had been assassinated by one of our people, it's totally unbelievable.
So obviously it was horrible and the shock was tremendous. Were there any aftershocks? What was the effect on the people of Israel? I mean, I think they're still going through it. I don't think people comprehend it yet, do they?
I do believe that such a shock affected all of us. Absolutely. Whether you are from the right side or left side, people started to understand that even if you sing in a different way, the only way is to speak with each other and not to put a knife on each other or a gun on each other. That's the lesson that we have to draw. We are a democratic society. The decision is being taken by votes, and you establish a government by the majority of the people. And you have to let this government rule for the few years that they have to rule. You cannot take a gun and change the decision of the people of the country. And I think that we have to be more tolerant toward each other, to listen, and to understand that we can speak, but only speak in dialogue and not to use rifles and knives against each other. That's the most important thing. And I believe that we learned this lesson. I do believe it.
How is the integration of the religious boys into the army today? Is it doing well? Like you have the Hesder Yeshiva boys who, I understand they're brilliant fighters and they're wonderful fighters. And I think that's pretty symbolic to Israel today, isn't it?
Well, the yeshiva soldiers, the Hesder soldiers are frankly excellent soldiers. I mean, basically during all the years in the artillery, I used to have those young guys serving, and a lot of motivation and a lot of power. Excellent soldiers. Some of them are officers in many units today. They are integrated 100% in the IDF. There's a different problem with those who do not serve, and I don't want to discuss this issue at this point, but it is a problem because, as you know well, Leon, in the Israeli society, not to serve in the IDF is a stigma which goes with you until your last day. Whenever you go, anywhere you go, the first question that somebody asks you, where have you been serving? And if you haven't been serving, you're having a serious problem everywhere. And I think in a city, in a community like the community of Israel, it makes sense. Because you ask yourself what a country could do to you, but there are at least 3 years that you should ask yourself what is that you could and should do for the country.
All right, Eliezer, you served since 73 up in the north, so you know Lebanon better than I know 34th Street. Is there an answer to the Lebanese crisis up there? I mean, a lot of Israeli soldiers are being killed, and I know it sends waves of, not terror, but people get extremely upset about what's going on in Lebanon. What should happen up there?
Well, I must be very honest with you. I've been in Lebanon since 73, I believe, every single month. I've been commanding the artillery forces, the Israeli forces in Lebanon at 84, 85, during the war of attrition after the Lebanese war. And I've been there every single operation for many years. And unfortunately, I must tell all of us, there are no miracle solutions to the problem there. And if some people in Israel think that by just withdrawing to another line, we are going to solve any problem, I frankly believe it is a mistake.
Really?
There are no miraculous solution there. I mean, if you are going to withdraw from the line which we are holding now to the international line, you'll find a terrorist trying to shoot not the soldiers, but the children of Avivim and Misgavam and Manara. So I really don't see that we can do it just to pull back and that's that. It's not going to work. It's a major mistake, and only those who haven't been there could suggest.
You're right. There's a lot of talk about that now. Every time there's a terrible problem, especially after the helicopter crash, there was a lot of talk in the Israeli cabinet or the Israeli Knesset about unilateral withdrawal. You think it's not a good idea?
I must tell you, Leon, when I was serving there, and I've been serving there for many years, our mission was to defend the Israeli villages and citizens on the Northern Command, which means that we are the soldiers defending the civilians. It was clear that we have to fight and to do everything to prevent any terrorist activity against civilians. I don't see any technical way right now, according to the situation that we face now, that we are going to withdraw to the international line and to face terrorists on the border. And you know pretty well that Misgavam and Manara are sitting on the border. I mean, somebody could sit with a rifle at terrorist and shoot to the windows of the bus, which are taking the children at 7 o'clock to the schools. There is no way in the world that I, as a civilian, would have allowed my family to live in such a place if I would know that the IDF is giving 100% security. And it's unfortunate that we are facing a very tough war there, a war of attrition. And we'll have to find some solution, some military solution to the problems. But I don't think that just to withdraw is going to solve anything. It's going to make the problem much more problematic.
When I visited Lebanon, I met with General Achad, one-armed man. Is he still operating with the SLA up there?
Sure.
Right. And he's the boss?
Sure. He is.
He is, huh?
He's quite a character.
You still have the radio station up on the hill there, too?
Exactly, the radio station, which is broadcasting all over, and I believe that many are listening to this station because it's very reliable. They know whatever they say something, they know it's truth, and he's doing his job. I'm sure that they are now sensitive because, they also read and they listen to what's happening in Israel. And they know when people are starting to discuss withdrawal, then they know what's the meaning for them. I mean, it's easy.
You know what I found fascinating when I went up there? I went to the Golani where they train, and they even gave me some shooting lessons, which I failed very well. Didn't shoot too well, but what I saw in these young kids was they wanted to volunteer for these roughest actions. It was unbelievable. The Israeli army or the Israeli defense forces it's incredible to me that still people want to go to Sayeret Golani, which is the Scouts of Golani. They want to go to the Sayeret Makala. They want to go to all these special units. By the way, Bibi Netanyahu comes from that unit, and Ehud Barak, your former employer, comes from that. You have an overabundance of volunteers for that still. Am I correct?
That's true. To be even more precise, in some of the units you have 10, 15 volunteers to every single place at the unit, which is unbelievable.
How do you explain that?
You have to realize that in Israel still today, to serve in military, it's like a credit card.
Badge of honor?
Which gives you the honor, and when you are later, after finishing your compulsory service, any place in the society, the first question, where have you been serving? And when you say I've been serving in Sayeret, Matkal, or a very special unit, it gives you immediately a kind of description about your personality. Who are you?
By the way,
without saying anything.
We told Barak that one of the problems he would have, Barak is the man who probably will lead the Labor Party after June, and you saw him on our show. He's the former chief of staff, and he made a commando raid in Lebanon in the 70s or 80s, and he dressed up as a woman. And I said one of the big problems in his life will be with the religious party. They won't accept a man who dressed up as a woman to do a commando raid, and it's the first crackle we got out of him because he's very stodgy on television. But to that unit, which is a very brazen unit, it's just unbelievable how you people still are able to get volunteers for that.
Able? I mean,
you're overwhelmed by people.
The problem is not how to get the volunteers, whom to reject. That's
I had a friend of mine, Barlev's son, who was head of that unit, Omer Barlev. Yes, he
lives with me in the same place, Kochavia.
Right, and he lives in Kochavia here, where Ehud Barak also lives, all the ex-generals or generals. Now you're still a general, right?
Yes.
So you're now helping the soldiers that we're talking about live a better life. Am I correct?
That's correct. I mean, that's an organization which is called the Aguda Leman HaChayal in Israel, the Association for the Well-Being of Soldiers, and it goes back really to World War II, when the Jewish community, it was not the state of Israel, the community in Palestine, felt that they need to support morally their children who have been serving in the British Army, which makes sense, to send gifts and packages and to take care of them and to build a soldier's home for them. And since then, the same spirit, the same ideology remains today. And often people do ask me, Eliezer, with such a huge budget that you have for military, what's the problem to support those few programs? I think, yes, we are able to support those programs, but those programs and the kind of connection between the people here in the United States, all over the world, the people in Israel and the soldiers, a direct link, not through agencies and government. That's the most important thing. And that's why I think that this organization is so important. And frankly, it takes care of education, of some relaxations for a soldier. Take a soldier in the Golani Brigade you have mentioned before. Those soldiers are running 360 days a year in Lebanon.
It's like Marines, in case the other people don't know the Golani. I just want to explain it to my audience.
An infantry unit. So what is their routine? Lebanon, West Bank, Gaza, training. Once again, Lebanon, training, Gaza, West Bank. We take them for 1 week of rest and recreation during a year to a facility on the Mediterranean, really to give them a good time. I think it's really the minimum that you can give as a combat soldier.
Wow.
That's kind of programs, scholarship for combat soldiers. Many soldiers are coming from family that have a problem to afford university.
Well, you made your point well, and we're going to have to leave only because we're out of time. We'd love to discuss more with you. I want to ask you one question and close the show. Out of your 4 children, They'll all serve in the army, I assume, or they are serving now?
No, they are still
They're
young.
still young.
They'll be serving.
Is it your hope that they don't serve?
I hope that they will serve. I hope that they will serve because I believe that to serve the country is something which is extremely important, and I hope that they'll be part of an army which is an army during peaceful times.
Let's kiss on those words. Have a successful tenure here and promotion when you get back.
And I'll take the opportunity to invite you to join us and the Minister of Defense on Wednesday when we salute brave soldiers of Israel.
You got a deal. Kosher food?
Sure.
We'll be there. We'll see you next week with Alan Hevesy, the controller of City, New York, and a fellow named Bianco who wrote The Reichmans, a fascinating book.